Hey guys, I'm Brittany from Acre Roots, where we talk about growing a lot on a little bit of space, and today we are talking about tomatoes, specifically whether or not it's okay to pick them at sign of first blush, or if you should wait to let them completely ripen on the vine before picking them. This is one of those things that every time I see it pop up in like a Facebook gardening group, I lose my mind because people lose their minds arguing over this. People swear that you have to leave your tomatoes on the vine to completely ripen to have the best taste. Others, like me and science, say that you can take them off the vine at sign of very first blush to let them completely table ripen, and that there will be no difference in taste. But why is it scientifically actually okay or a good idea to pick your tomatoes before they fully ripen on the vine? The first reason is the science behind how tomatoes actually ripen. Now, not all fruits can ripen off the vine. A lot of fruits need to stay attached to their plants to fully ripen before you pick them. Tomatoes are not one of those fruits. Once the tomato reaches what is referred to the breaker stage or sign of first blush, that's the stage where you're gonna see just a tiny little bit of pink come into that green tomato, or yellow if it's a yellow tomato. Once it reaches this stage, it's actually going to form what's called an abscission layer on the stem to cut the fruit off from the stem on the plant and prevent it from receiving any more water or nutrients from that plant. So it's sealing itself off and it's saying, all right, I'm starting to ripen. I've got everything I need from this plant. Let's do this ourselves from now on. That's because tomatoes are just a super special kind of fruit where all of the internal sugar and acid content is locked inside the fruit at the moment that that stem seals. This allows the remaining softening and color developing to occur completely inside the tomato. So it has everything it needs to fully ripen off the vine once that seal is created on the stem. Sunlight is not even required for this process. I take all of my tomatoes downstairs in our basement and I lay them out on a towel because all you really need is a nice warm room temperature to regulate that color change and the softening of each of the fruits. So let's take a look at my Roma tomato plants right now. In this bed behind me right here, I've got 3 determinate bush Roma tomato plants, and they're kind of starting to suffer. They're kind of starting to look a little rough, which it is mid to late-ish August here in Maryland Zone 7A. That is completely normal. I do not prune off a lot of foliage on my determinate bush tomatoes. I just kind of let them go for the summer, pick as much as I can, and then pull them out. And it is about time for me to put in a lot of my fall garden seeds, and I want to use this bed for that. So I'm trying to speed along the process of getting as many tomatoes picked from these plants as I can so that I can let them ripen indoors and pull the plants out to give myself another extra week or 2 of growing time for that fall garden. So let's take a little look-see at our plants here to see if we can find any that are ready to pull. Now I have a couple like little ones that I've just kind of been ignoring. I should probably start to pull these. These are ones that I probably will not even bother to blanch and can just because they're so small, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off and set them aside. So sometimes looking at the green tomatoes can be a little challenging to determine if you have a sign of first blush. But if you find one that is near a purely green tomato, it's a lot easier to see that you're getting that sign of first blush because it just has like a little bit of a tinge to it. So this one right here, I'm gonna give this one, oh, hi buddy, hi little cucumber beetle. We don't like you. Smash. That one I'm gonna give another day. But looking up here, this one right here is looking a little bit more like it's a tiny bit blushed at the top here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this one off. This one is pretty early in the blushing stage. This is maybe the earliest I would pick it because when I see it next to a purely green tomato, I can see that it does look a little bit more blush. This is a good example here. This one on the right side, I would not pick yet. This one is probably the earliest I would pick. Let's take a look at this one down here. This one looks pretty similar. So we're gonna go ahead and pick this one here. And then we're gonna look down at these. These are all looking pretty green. I see no signs of blush. Over here, let's look at these two. So these two right here, you can look at them next to each other and see that this one looks a little bit more blush than this one. I'm gonna pick this one and give this one one more day on the vine to finish up what it needs to do. And then let's come over here and look at some other examples. These two right here. Okay, looking at these two together, not sure if it's coming across on camera, but this one looks a little bit farther along than this one. So I'm gonna pick this one and give this one 1 or 2 more days on here as well. Here's another good example of 2. These are on the smaller side, but I still went ahead and picked them. This one right here is showing kind of like an all over starting of the blush, and then this one is just starting to blush on the bottom here. So these are 2 good candidates to pick as well. So all of the tomatoes I'm picking today are eventually going to start to look like this. So this one down here by my pinky, this one I picked last night, is showing just the very start of a blush, the breaker stage here on the bottom. This one at the top of this little triangle of tomatoes, you can see that the blush is really starting to expand, especially when you turn it around and it's turning that tomato red. And then this one, the red color is deepening on the bottom of the tomato and spreading up to the top. So all of these will eventually be completely red tomatoes just sitting out on a table in my basement because, again, that tomato has everything it needs to ripen inside of it after the tomato seals itself off from the stem of the plant. And I mentioned earlier in the video that sign of first blush can mean a little bit of like orangey pinkish in the tomato if it's a red tomato, but I also grow orange and yellow tomatoes. I have all of my cherry pole tomatoes, cherry and grape pole tomatoes behind me, and in all of this I've got yellow tomatoes, I've got 2 types of orange tomatoes, and I've got 1 red cherry tomato. So lots of different color stages that I'm going to show you right now, because this same principle applies not just for like your canning paste tomatoes and your big boy tomatoes, but also your cherry and pear and grape and all those sorts of different types of smaller tomatoes. And we look at these tomatoes and we can see that not only have these not reached full size, but they're completely green and very firm. Once you go down the stem, you see that they're getting bigger, but they are all still green on here. Below it, though, is an area where we can see that some of these have reached the breaker stage, including this one. So these will be a nice, lovely, deep orange color when they finish ripening, but this is a good stage to pick these at, and it looks like it already has a teeny tiny little bit of pest damage at the top, so probably good that we're picking now. I probably should have picked a day or 2 earlier. Down here, we've got another example of something that has a little bit of pest damage already. Probably should have picked this one a day or 2 earlier, because this one looks like it'll be ripe in about a day or 2, but you can't win them all, right? You can't get every single thing from pests, especially when you're like we are and you don't spray or anything. This is a good example of one picked at a good time that will ripen completely off the vine and has absolutely no pest damage right now, so good to catch this one right now. So I will say that I find picking at sign of first blush to be a little bit easier on red tomatoes. These are yellow pear tomatoes, and sometimes I have a really hard time figuring out if these are starting to blush or if they are still green. But looking at this stem right here, looking at all of them next to each other, I think it's pretty clear that this one right here is starting to blush, whereas the rest of them are either pretty green or still haven't reached their full size. So we're going to go ahead and pick this guy right here, take a look at him up close. And you can see that he's got some hints of yellow coming in around here, while this top is still pretty green. So this one will completely ripen off the vine, and we will save this one from the pests and splitting that will probably occur if I were to leave him to fully ripen. And I don't know why I gendered that tomato and I'm calling him a him. He just seems like a him to me, even though most of my tomatoes, I think they're girls. And I'm not going to explain myself further on that one. It's just a feeling. So why pick early off the vine if you could just leave them on the vine to fully ripen? Why pick them off and put them on a table inside of your house just because you can? Because just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should, right? Well, there are some very good reasons why you should pick your tomatoes early, especially if they are heirloom varieties. I showed you a little bit of pest damage on some of those cherry tomatoes, some of our sun gold cherry tomatoes, and that is the #1 reason that I pick my tomatoes early. If I can pick a tomato early and a pest has not found it, stink bugs haven't started to chew on it, a hornworm has not found it and started to eat up those tomatoes, if I can pick them at sign of first blush and let them ripen safely in the house away from any pests, that is a good thing. I saved a couple tomatoes down here to show you guys that's got some serious pest damage on them. So this one I should have picked a lot earlier. I came out to pick it and it had something eating all on it here. So this one is going to go into the compost, and then its little friend right next to it had a little bit of what appears to be probably, I would say, maybe an army worm eating on this one here. Another really good reason to pick tomatoes early and often is because, especially with heirloom varieties, they're going to be very vulnerable to splitting. So a lot of times what I will try and do is come out, if I'm expecting a lot of rain, I will come out and I will pick all of my tomatoes because I know that a sudden influx of moisture to these plants from rain can cause splitting. This is an heirloom variety, and this one has some pretty significant pest damage on it, so we're going to compost this guy. But I'm looking for one that has some splitting to show you guys right now because the yellow pear heirloom variety is especially vulnerable to splitting. Okay, here are two examples of the yellow pears that have started blushing and are starting to split. And this is a pretty minor split. This one's not a very big deal because it's not actually exposing the inside of the tomato, but once they split, they just become kind of messy to store and wash and keep clean. And it can introduce other issues if they split out on the vine and pests come in and start feasting. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to pull them inside to finish ripening, but I'll see if I can find one with a little bit worse of splitting from all the rain that we got. Okay, unfortunately, I actually cannot find any tomatoes that have really bad splitting on them. I'm very proud of myself. I got out here and I picked a ton of stuff before the really bad rain we got yesterday. So I'm hoping that that is showing how effective this is. I don't have a ton of split tomatoes on my plants because I've been out here picking early and often and table ripening. So the last reason I want to talk about why I like picking my tomato fruits early and often, we're going to look at this sun gold plant here. These are actually 2 sun gold cherry tomatoes planted in this little bed right here. Climbing up a trellis, I've kind of started to let these go a little crazy by this point in the year, but we are still getting a ton of fruits from them. And I want them to continue producing fruits for as long as possible because I'm going to let these tomato plants ride to the very bitter end of the season. So even though there's that abscission layer, the xylem connection between the fruits and the plant can remain partially functional, which will allow them to continue drawing some water and other trace amounts of things to the fruits from the plant. So they do continue to be a bit of a burden on the plant, and picking them just removes that completely from the equation and allows the plant to focus all of its energies onto those smaller and more developing fruits that have not reached the breaker stage yet. So since we want as many tomatoes as possible from our sun gold cherry tomato plants, because this remains one of the only tomatoes my child will eat, we will be coming out here daily to pick early and often to decrease the overall load on this plant and let it produce as many of these delicious little babies as possible. And really quickly before we wrap up here, I wanted to show you guys what my table ripening setup looks like. I just throw out a little cloth and line everything up on some little cloths in the basement, and that's about it. That is literally all I do. You can see some of these look kind of crappy because they had a little bit of damage on them when I decided to salvage them, but mostly the internal process does exactly what it should be doing, and we have some beautiful, beautiful heirloom tomatoes down here that I need to be bringing upstairs and starting to do some things with. So I put the cloth under them just to kind of help absorb any extra moisture that might be down here. It doesn't need to be a completely dry environment at all, but I don't know, I just feel like that's a good idea to put a little cloth under all of them if I'm washing them off before I'm bringing down here, just to get rid of a little bit of that extra moisture. Okay guys, to recap, the best way to pick your tomatoes is early and often. As soon as you see that sign of first blush, whether that's a little bit of a pinkish hue on a red tomato or a little bit of a yellowish hue on a yellow or orange tomato, pick early and often so you can table ripen. Once tomatoes hit that breaker stage or sign of first blush, they have everything they need to ripen off the vine. They don't even need light. You can just throw them on a table in your house. Scientifically, there is no difference between a tomato that you pick at first blush and let ripen on a table and a tomato that you let ripen completely on the vine. The biggest difference is that the one that you let ripen completely on the vine, someone may take a couple bites out of it before you get to it. So if you guys found this video because you were looking for reliable information on whether or not you can pick your tomatoes at sign of first blush and let them table ripen and still have them taste delicious, I hope you found this helpful. You definitely can, and you should. Until my next video, happy planting.